We begin tonight with Gary Delagnes, who is the president of the Police Officers Association of San Francisco and himself served as a police officer and an inspector for 28 years. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Arthur.
I had to prepare for this program, and part of it is I was looking at the results from this ad hoc committee on the police relations and so on. Mm-hmm. And I could not believe the situation as it is right now with regard to the safety in the streets, the attitude of the police officers. I guess I want to read two things to you. One, and tell me if this was right, that almost 40% of San Franciscans are now afraid of the streets.
Right. Oh, yes. Oh, San Franciscans, yes. 40% are supposedly afraid to come out of their houses.
Now, they said 30% of the police officers are fearful of their own prosecution for acts that they may engage in, within the line of duty. Is that an accurate figure?
I think it's much higher than that. I'm not sure where they came up with that figure, but it's much higher than that. The cop on the street, yes.
Okay. Homicide rate is headed towards another record year, as I understand.
Correct.
And that's not gang violence, because U.S. Attorney Ryan was on this program and said they really cut down on gang violence. This is just plain out homicides out on the streets.
Right.
All right. And now you have a police force that, I guess this whole ad hoc committee came out of that video incident that occurred where both the mayor and the chief of police condemned those officers or whatever that incident was without a hearing, without an investigation. What has that done? What does that do to the force that's out on the street then?
Well, I don't think it was just that incident. I think it goes back to Fajita Gate. I think it goes back a long ways to the relationship or the bad relationship with the Office of Citizen Complaints, the lack of trust that the officers have in the disciplinary process of the Office of Citizen Complaints. And following Prop H, the further civilianization and politicization of the police commission. And they don't, it's very simple. I guess the best way of putting it is the police officer on the street simply does not trust the disciplinary process of the San Francisco Police Department, and therefore you're not going to get the best work out of those officers because they're not going the extra mile for fear of
prosecution.
Okay,
now is this true that in that same ad hoc committee, it was a committee that was put together with former Chief Rivera,
correct,
former Mayor and Chief Frank Jordan,
correct,
and we'll go into some of the other people, that arrests have dropped from 58,000 to 36,000 between 2003 and 2004.
That's an accurate figure.
That is practically one half less arrests because of the same fear of prosecution and that you talked about earlier.
Contributing factors. One contributing factor probably is the fact that we're about 250 to 300 cops short on the street, which would probably you could parlay that into less arrests, but also the fact that
Excuse me, Gary.
Yes.
Hasn't that been true for several years?
It's been, yes, for the last 4 or 5 years we've been short between 200 and 350 depending on the number of retirements.
This is a drop of 58,000 to 36,000 between 2003 and 2004, and I mean that's rather recent, so it cannot be the lack of police on the street.
Even at that time we were short, but not as short as we are now. The primary reason, the primary cause is that police officers are not being as proactive on especially quality of life crimes as they normally would be for fear of prosecution from OCC. I'm talking about your recidivist drug dealer, your homeless person, your basic nuisance to society, where the cops in the old days would have got out of the car and said, hey, get your stuff and move on and get out. They're not doing it when they're driving by, because the next thing that happens is that homeless person goes down to OCC, says the police officer harassed me, and then the cop has to go down to OCC, deal with the same thing over and over again.
That's the 20,000 less arrests mainly. Are those quality of life type arrests that would have occurred?
I would say so, because we're going as hard as we ever did to serious crimes in progress. We're certainly not going to lay back on burglaries in progress, robberies in progress, but the quality of life crimes, which always seem to pop up in this city as a major problem in the neighborhoods, those are the areas where I believe that a lot of cops are just saying it's not even worth it.
Okay, and I remember hearing about in the hate, which is the core of the progressive movement, that now they are fed up with just this kind of crime, the quality of life crime. It's actually very serious out there right now. Skateboard gangs. homeless gangs and so on, controlling the streets? I mean, is it as bad as that? If you're doing 20,000 less arrests, it's got to have an impact on how the neighborhoods look like.
Haight Street, it's really an interesting place because that falls under the jurisdiction of Supervisor Mercarimi, who is obviously one of our more leftist, liberal supervisors. And I had a meeting with him not too long ago, and I said, Supervisor, you can't have it both ways. Either you need to enforce the law, and that involves quality of life crimes, or you need to not enforce the law. And what that means is you're going to have this problem on Haight Street. You're going to have recidivist drug dealers dealing meth, weed. You're going to have skateboard gangs. You're going to have out of control juveniles, and that's what you've got basically in that particular district. Haight-Ashbury is kind of a haven for the wannabes that never made it here in the mid-'60s. And most of the kids that we take on out there dealing drugs are from back east. They've just kind of drifted out here. But you know, it's a city that doesn't have the will to deal with quality of life crimes. Mm-hmm. They get caught up in their own liberalism, and they don't know how to deal with beggars and homeless people.
I thought Care Not Cash was going to eliminate all that problem.
I think Care Not Cash did go a long ways towards eliminating the problem. But what we're seeing now is people who don't get the cash. We're seeing a huge increase in other quality of life crimes like break-ins of vehicles. Because now they don't get the money, they're not getting the subsidy, so they're doing more begging to make more money, or breaking into cars or other quality of life crimes. We've had a situation now. This will really, it surprised me even. We're having thieves steal milk out of Walgreens and then go down to a grocery store in the Mission and sell it to the grocer.
It's like a business.
Exactly.
A redistribution business.
We actually had an undercover unit that was doing that, going into the. So now we're seeing these types of things as a result of the Care Not Cash, which I think has eliminated part of the homeless problem.
But left a lot of chronic homeless in fact, some of the more dangerous people who were never on welfare to begin with, so you couldn't take their welfare away.
Right.
Okay, now before we go into some of these recommendations, okay, what you're trying to say is that if it was easier for the police to make these kinds of arrests without fear of the prosecution or being brought before a body, you believe that would lead to more quality of life arrests? I mean, is it a one-to-one reality here, or are there other factors here?
There's other factors. There has to be a commitment not only on the police department, but also from the district attorney's office and also from the judges, from the courts. I mean, when I was in narcotics for 15 years, we would send cops out to make drug buys from the same people over and over and over, 4 or 5 times in a year, hand-to-hand sales of drugs to a cop. Never go to jail, never go to prison. Probation, extended probation, drug court. There's just simply nobody's held accountable for their actions in this city, and it's a big problem. There is simply no price to pay. And that's why we have drug dealers that come in from the East Bay every day and deal out of the BART stairs, because there's no fear of incarceration.
All right, so, and now we'll get into some of the recommendations from this ad hoc group. So there's many people responsible. I mean, it's, many offices responsible. The district attorney's office, the mayor's office, the board of supervisors. In other words, it's not one thing you can do to improve the safety in the streets. Am I right?
It would have to be a strategy. First of all, you've got to get yourself up to full staffing. If you get yourself up to full staff, and then you're going to have the ability to have more footbeats, you're going to have the ability to do more what we call saturation units that can go in and saturate drug dealer areas or neighborhoods where there's a big problem with recidivist drug dealers. But you can't do it when you've got 3 or 4 radio cars a night at a district station, because they're running from run to run. So until you're up to full staffing, you really can't be that pro-enforcement.
Did the mayor add 200 or 300 positions in this budget?
Well, that's another interesting topic, because the mayor's best intentions of hiring 5 academy classes, and they're not getting the bodies. They cannot recruit qualified applicants. They will not be able to have 5 academy classes because people don't want to be cops here.
And why don't they want to be cops here?
I think it's 3 reasons. I think, first of all, it's a national crisis because of Generation X. There seems to be There seems to be a hesitancy in a lot of members of Generation X to get into law enforcement, work nights, work weekends. That's just kind of not what their thing is. Secondly, I think the cost of living out here obviously is prohibitive. And thirdly, this city, whether they want to admit it or not, has created an environment politically where lateral transfers or people that want to come from other departments aren't going to come here because they're not going to walk into this political setting.
All right, now, you realize that what you've done, Gary, is created a no-win situation here. I mean, there doesn't no exit situation, all right? It's not the chief's fault. It's not the mayor's fault. It's not the district attorney's fault. And yet you've got this situation of record homicides and people fearful of the streets. Are you saying there is no hope?
No, I'm saying that, first of all, for the city to allow themselves to be so short of police officers and to not foresee this problem 4 or 5 years ago was a big mistake. They should have planned for this. They knew the retirements that were going to hit in the post-Vietnam years here in 2007, 2008, 2009. They should have foreseen this problem. Secondly, they need to figure out a way to continue to recruit qualified candidates and get them in there, but it's going to take time.
But even if you had a full force right now, what you've stated and what this ad hoc group concluded was that there's a fear out there to make arrests. So how are you solving a problem by simply adding 200 or 300 new officers, even if you could?
The disciplinary process has to change.
And? You got 2 minutes to tell me how you would change it.
The disciplinary process, the intake process, and the way that OCC does business has to change immediately. Office of Citizen Complaints.
Okay,
they have to be monitored. Okay. People have to watch the watchdog because they're getting away with murder. They bring our cops down there for the most ridiculous things you could ever imagine.
Okay, how do you handle disciplinary measures to bring this dysfunction back to a fine-running police force? How do you handle disciplinary situations?
First of all, OCC civilian oversight is okay. We want competent civilian oversight. We want the officers' rights respected and protected. We also need to clear up the backlog of disciplinary cases to give the chief more disciplinary power, to let her suspend for up to 90 days. We need to take a good hard look at the police commission, look at the appointees on the police commission and say, what is their real goals here? We need to depoliticize the police commission. We need to bring it back to what it was, which was a monitoring of the police department. They don't run the police department, they oversee the police department. The chief needs to be stronger, the police commission needs to be depoliticized, and OCC needs to come up with a document.
How important would it be if one of the measures that they recommended was give the police chief the opportunity to suspend, after 10 days right now, it has to be referred to
police commission.
Police commission. If you created a strong police chief who had the power to, longer than that, say 90 days, suspend for 90 days, and would that make a significant difference?
Huge difference. Huge difference, because the way it stands now, you can be disciplined. It can go to OCC. OCC can say, we believe the officer did something wrong here. Refer it to the chief for discipline. The chief says, all the rules and procedures were followed. I won't sign these charges. You're wrong. She sends it back to the police, to OCC. OCC goes directly to the police commission, brings the cops up on charges. Imagine being a cop and knowing that you can be disciplined by 2 civilian agencies without the police department being involved.
So if you had a strong chief, and is that the case in other cities, that they do, other chiefs have that ability to do disciplinary for 90 days or longer?
Longer.
So do you believe that is the one thing that can be done and should be done that could start to have some real meaningful change?
Ultimate discipline should lie in the hands of the chief of police. That's where it belongs. That's why she gets a lot of money. She makes a lot of money to make these decisions. I think she's willing to accept that responsibility. That's what needs to happen.
Good. Gary, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
Gary Delagnes from the Police Officers Association. And please stay with us. We'll be right back.